What's up everybody, my name is Phosphoros and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play Arcane in Dragonflight patch 10.0. I'll be telling you exactly what to press and what order for optimal damage, so let's get right into it. So first things first, let's take a look at our talents. On the general tree highlighted in green, you'll see the talents that I consider to be a requirement. These are talents that will give you a direct damage increase and should be included in every build. The only exception to this is if, for example, you're on a rating counter where you aren't getting full value from shifting powers cooldown reduction. In that specific scenario, you'd want to take Meteor. Outside of that, shifting power is the way to go. One thing to note here as well is that Temporal Warp allows you to have 2 Time Warp buffs active at the same time, so the play is to always try and double up on Temporal Warp whenever possible. As for the rest of the talents on the general tree, it's all up to you based on what you feel you need. I like going mostly defensive talents in Arcane Warding, Winter's Protection, Tempest Barrier, Cryo Freeze, and Accumulative Shielding, with a bit of mobility included in Master of Time, Displacement, and Shimmer. Speaking of Shimmer, Ice Flows is a decent alternative if you prefer that. The only reason I haven't been taking it so far is that there seems to be a bunch of weird interactions and bugs with the spell at the moment, so I'm taking Shimmer for now, but eventually I would like to move over into Ice Flows. A notable mention here as well is that Ice Nova does have its uses in both the single target and AoE rotation, as you'll see later, so it's also worthy of a talent choice. Onto the Arcane tree, this is the pure single target build. We take Siphon Storm, Harmonic Echo, and Arcane Harmony as our capstones, and if you're wondering why we take Nether Tempest, it's because it has a pretty strong synergy with Arcane Echo in that each time Nether Tempest ticks, it also procs Arcane Echo. Another notable talent is Nether Precision. This talent is the core of what makes Arcane strong this time around, and you'll notice that Arcane Blast is now our highest damaging ability outside of AoE situations. The reason for this is that we're abusing Nether Precision as much as possible, so I highly recommend you get a tracker for this talent because it currently has a kind of anti-synergy with Concentration in that Concentration buffed Arcane Missiles will not generate Nether Precision stacks. I'll have the Nether Precision tracker that I used linked in the description of this video as well as some other very helpful resources, so make sure to check that out as well. Outside of pure single target scenarios, we have this build for funnel damage. Funnel damage is a damage type where the higher the target count, the more single target damage you'll deal. So the only difference between the pure single target build and this one is that we remove our points in Arcane Missiles and Arcane Familiar, and instead put them into Charged Orb and Arcane Cleave. And this is where our funnel damage comes into play. Arcane Orb will generate more Arcane charges as we hit more targets, so it gains more value along with having another stack. Arcane Cleave will cause Barrage to spread, hitting nearby targets and increasing damage to our primary target based on the total amount of enemies hit. This talent is the core of where Arcane gains its funnel. And lastly, we have a stacked Cleave build. This is pretty much Arcane's AoE focused build. It sacrifices single target damage in order to deal more AoE damage. Now in Mythic Plus, as the season hasn't started yet, I'm not too sure if this will be used over the funnel build, but it's definitely a viable option, so we'll see how it plays out as the season unfolds. So before we head into the single target rotation, I'd like to speak a bit about Arcane's damage pattern. Arcane is a very ebb and flow style to its damage pattern. About every 45 seconds you'll have a big burn with Arcane Surge, followed by a period of low filler damage, into a mini burn, followed by another period of low filler damage, and then the cycle repeats. Now let's head into this single target rotation. 15 seconds before the pull you want to be spamming Arcane Explosion to fish for clear casting procs. This part may vary based on your haste levels, but in general, 9 seconds before the pull starts you want to cast Evocation so we can start stacking Siphon Storm. At around 3 seconds you want to cast a Rune of Power into an Arcane Blast precast and Arcane Orb. The pull has now begun and we already have 4 Arcane charges, so we're ready to start our Arcane Surge burn. However, this burn will change based on if you have double Time Warp activated or not. So if you plan on popping double Time Warp you want to immediately stack Arcane Harmony to 20, then continue with the burn rotation. If you aren't popping double Time Warp then you don't have to worry about Arcane Harmony and can immediately start with Radiant Spark when the pull begins. After Radiant Spark, we cast 3 Arcane Blasts into Arcane Surge and Nether Tempest. Now, if Time Warp is up, you want to cast Arcane Blast and spellqueue Arcane Barrage into it. If you're not sure what it means to spellqueue, I'll have an explanation of it down in the description. If you're not in Time Warp, then forget about Arcane Blast, just cast Arcane Barrage and Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling but right before it lands. The reason that we pop Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling is so that we gain about an extra second of Touch of the Magi uptime while still benefiting from Barrage inside it. Also, Touch of the Magi itself gives us 4 Arcane charges, so right after Touch of the Magi we want to follow a simple priority list. Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts, clear casted Arcane Missiles, and regular Arcane Blasts. Now, Due to Arcane Bombardment, if your target is under 35% health, you want to barrage and have it land just before Touch of the Magi ends. Otherwise, use Presence of Mind to fit one last Arcane Blast into Touch. And finally, if you're in Double Bloodlust, you want to cast a barrage on the last global of your Arcane Surge buff. Otherwise, just follow the priority list as usual, and once your Arcane Surge buff wears off, cast Shifting Power, and that's the end of the Arcane Surge burn. Now, I know this may be a lot to take in all at once, especially since the rotation changes so much based on if Lust is active or if the target's in Execute. My best advice would be take it one step at a time, first learn the rotation without Lust or Execute, and then gradually start incorporating the other conditionals. To help you out with this, I created a cheat sheet that you can find in the description of this video, and it'll have everything you need to know about the rotation, so you can have that pulled up on the side while practicing. After the Surge burn, we head into the filler rotation. The filler rotation consists of following a simple priority list. Cast Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, Arcane Blast with Nether Precision, Arcane Missiles with Clear Casting, and regular Arcane Blasts. Now, when in filler, you'll need to conserve mana for your next upcoming burn. Mini burns require 60% mana or 85% mana in Time Warp. In the case that you need conserve to maintain these levels of mana, you can Nether Tempest at 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Barrage to clear your Arcane charges, and during Time Warp it may even be worth to use Ice Nova, Fire Blast, and Frostbolt in that order. If you're wondering why I specifically mentioned 4 Arcane charges for Nether Tempest, that's because Nether Tempest snapshots its damage based on the amount of charges when it was cast, so it's really only worth casting at 4 Arcane charges. Once again, all of this will be in the cheat sheet linked in the description, so make sure to check it out. Now let's head into the mini burn rotation. Make sure you have 4 Arcane charges, pop Rune of Power, Radiant Spark, 4 Arcane Blasts, Nether Tempest, and Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling right before it lands. From here, we once again follow a simple priority list. Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts, clear casted Arcane Missiles, and regular Arcane Blasts. For the mini burn, whether or not your target's in Execute, it's still worth to cast Barrage and have it land just before Touch of the Magi ends, and that's the end of the mini burn. From here, you enter back into the filler rotation until Evocation comes off cooldown, and the rotation effectively resets to the Arcane Surge burn stage. Here's a quick 3-minute segment of me performing the single target rotation on a training dummy. I'll have each stage of the rotation pop up on the screen so you can follow along. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. Now let's head into the AoE portion of the guide. We want to begin using the AoE rotation when we reach 3 targets. Keep in mind that in Mythic Plus you want to end every pull with 20 stacks of Arcane Harmony so you can immediately enter a burn phase on the next pull. So here's what the Surge Burn rotation will look like. Radiant Spark into either Arcane Orb if you have less than 3 Arcane charges, or Arcane Explosion if you have 3 or more Arcane charges. From here you cast Arcane Surge into Nether Tempest, and Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi. Then you cast an Arcane Blast and another Arcane Barrage. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind for AoE is that each of the Barrage casts should not be spellqueued. After that second Barrage, you follow a simple priority list. Arcane Missiles while clear casting, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion. Once your Arcane Surge buff wears off, cast Shifting Power, and that's the end of the Arcane Surge burn. From here you enter the filler rotation. The filler rotation for AoE is a simple priority list. Cast Ice Nova on cooldown, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, Arcane Missiles with clear casting procs, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion until 4 Arcane charges. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that in an actual Mythic Plus scenario, Arcane Harmony only serves us when we're going to be executing a burn. Therefore, if you don't plan on burning again in the pack you're currently in, you can consume clearcasting with an Arcane Explosion instead of Arcane Missiles to get more Arcane Barrages out. But keep in mind that, as a pull is dying, you want to end it with spamming Arcane Missiles so you can start the next pull burning with as many stacks of Arcane Harmony as possible. Now for the mini burn. Cast Rune of Power and Radiant Spark into either Arcane Orb if you have less than 3 Arcane charges, or Arcane Explosion if you have 3 or more Arcane charges. Then you cast Nether Tempest and Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi. From here, cast 2 Arcane Blasts and another Arcane Barrage. After that second Barrage, you follow a simple priority list. Arcane Missiles with clear casting, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion. Once Touch of the Magi wears off, you enter back into the filler rotation until Evocation's off cooldown, and the rotation effectively resets back to the Arcane Surge burn stage. Here's a quick 2-minute segment of me performing the AoE rotation on a group of training dummies. Keep in mind that in this clip I'm getting multiple burns out, but in a Mythic Plus scenario you'll mostly be alternating between the Arcane Surge burn and mini burn between packs. You'll also want to make sure that as one pack is ending, you begin building 20 stacks of Arcane Harmony to start a burn immediately on the next pack. Now before I end the video, if you plan on using the stacked Cleave build, most of the rotation is exactly the same as what we just covered. The only difference is that since we don't have Arcane Harmony talented, we don't stack it when we double Lust on the single target Surge burn. As for AoE burns, we do use clearcasted Arcane Missiles inside Touch of the Magi, but in filler, we Arcane Explosion through clearcasting procs. This is because we don't have Arcane Harmony talented, so casting Arcane Missiles in AoE is not as worth anymore. As for when to use Mana Gem, you use it at any point during Touch of the Magi when you have 1 or less clearcasting stacks. This is because using the gem will give you 2 free clearcastings, so if you use it at 2 or more stacks, you'll end up wasting procs. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope this saved you some time and brought you up to speed. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask in the comments. I'm very active there. Please subscribe. I appreciate the support, and I wish you a very nice day. Take care.